So, when you're doing a book tour for a book about etiquette, what kind of people turn up? What kind of people have you been meeting?
I've been meeting mostly people, or many people, that I have gotten to know or connected with online over the years, and I'm getting to see them in person for the first time in cities near them. So it's been a lot of fun.
Are there any typical subgroups or certain sections of the population that you find have gravitated to your content more than others?
Yes, so I find people from the South definitely resonate with content about etiquette. I also find that women that are in it's interesting, like women in male dominated industries often really resonate with the
Hmm.
content, and they like to talk about the nuances of like how to behave at work and at home and in their social life. And then I also find a lot of moms and grandmothers resonate with the content and buy the book for their children and their grandchildren and things like that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things. That if I hear a dad say that he shows his sons my videos, or a mom says that she is,
Yeah,
putting her kids onto them, that's always really cool, isn't it?
definitely.
It's interesting you mention a lot of people in the South seem to gravitate toward that. So I was born in Alabama and I grew
Mhm.
up in England, and I've always been, kind of fascinated by those cultural differences and also the cultural differences around the entire United States. How would you say etiquette differs from, let's say, the Northeast and New York and DC down to more kind of traditional Southern communities?
I would say what kindness looks like is different in different parts of the world. So, like, if you go to the Northeast, like a place like New York, what some might see as being curt or abrupt or even short tempered, others might see as being really considerate of others' time because
Mm.
it's a place where people don't have time to waste and it's just a faster pace of life. Whereas, like, you can look at things like, and maybe you've seen stuff like this on social media about the different ways that people say goodbye in certain areas of the world, like the Midwest goodbye. It's like people are calling the next day to say goodbye again, or they're saying goodbye like a million times and they're never leaving. And that's like part of the culture and part of the social niceties of that area. So I would say it looks different in different places, but manners are all about kindness, integrity, and respect. So whether you're saying bless your heart and having sweet tea, or you're like being really polite on the metro in Washington, D.C., or somewhere in the Northeast, what matters most is like your intention and your heart behind how you do what you do.
Hmm. I think this is something that a lot of people maybe misunderstand about the whole purpose of etiquette or social grace. It's not necessarily about being stuffy and formulaic and fake, almost. People may interpret it that way. It is
Mm-hmm.
more about being considerate of others and learning how to do that. What are some of the big, misnomers or misunderstandings you find that people often have about etiquette in the modern age?
I so appreciate that question. I think one of the big ones is that etiquette only applies in formal or expensive scenarios when nothing could be further from the truth. Does it matter when you're experiencing a meal that's the height of formality? Yes, but it also matters when you are deciding how to respond to a difficult text that you receive, or going to a funeral for your best friend's parent, or just these everyday things that we experience that are not fancy and are not necessarily expensive. And then another misconception is that it's old fashioned, that it doesn't matter today as much as it did before. And I see that it matters now more than ever as we live in this really multicultural information age where we're interacting with so many people with different backgrounds, and it's more important than ever to be kind and respectful and just aware of those that are around you.
Hmm. I'm personally noticing that people have been so absorbed in social media and so removed from more traditional community situations and social situations that people are actually seeking more of a return to that, and therefore they want to learn how to conduct themselves in those type of environments and actually forge stronger connections in real life. Are you seeing something like that too?
Absolutely. And I think seeing the content that you put together, it makes so much sense to me that it resonates because people are yearning for someone to help them with these things. And like we have this innate need for human connection, and etiquette at its core is all about like relationship building and honoring the people that you're with. And when you have more confidence in how to conduct yourself, how to comport yourself, how to have a conversation, it makes that relationship building so much easier.
So once you get beyond the more, let's say, simple common sense things about treating people kindly and building those connections, what
Mhm.
are some areas or disciplines of etiquette that do require more formal instruction and do take a little longer to get your head around and put into practice?
Well, I would say two categories come to mind. First is dining etiquette, and then second would be protocol. And with dining etiquette, it's things like knowing what utensil to use, how to hold a glass, how to order something, who sits first, when to stand. All of these kinds of things are they're not rocket science, but they do take some time to learn and then to
Mm-hmm.
practice over time. Dining etiquette and then protocol. And this will look different depending on where you work or where you are, but it's important to know like if you're putting together a seating arrangement or if you're addressing an envelope or how to introduce someone, having a general understanding of hierarchy or at least knowing when to double check things or when to ask questions before making an assumption as to like who should sit where or how someone should be introduced, things like that
Mm-hmm.
um, are good to know.
Okay, great. And a couple of things that I found that really help anybody just learn these more social skills and more socially confident skills are I'm a big believer in dancing, actually, social dancing in particular. It doesn't
I
matter
love
whether
this.
that's, ballroom or country dancing, anything where you have to, seek permission from a partner and you're dancing with them and like there's a kind of beginning and an end. There's a level of
Yes.
formality there, even if it's a very informal style. That's something that when I have sons, they're going to learn how to do this. It's going to be something that will teach them a lot of social skills, I think.
That's
And another
fantastic.
one is, yeah, and another one is going to more networking events as well. So
Mhm.
when it comes to making an introduction, let's say you've gone with a friend or a coworker, and you want to introduce them to somebody you've just met. What's a great way to do that?
So you would say, this is my friend, say their name, and then if you're aware of some sort of connection that you have or you can provide some context, do that. So what you don't want to do is say like, James, this is Greg, this is James, and then just leave it at that. You want to make them aware of some common
Mm.
connection or give them a launching pad, if you will, to their conversation. You don't need to micromanage the conversation and force them to talk about whatever you suggest, but you've at least done your part to make the connection to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've all met some people that just seem to have this natural magnetism to them, especially at networking events, and it's like they're everybody's best friend. They remember everybody's name. They have this beaming positivity to them, which I'm always drawn to that, and I'm always very inspired when I meet people like that to try and be
Mhm.
more like them. But some of us are just not, and I would say personally, I'm a little bit more of a reserved person. I definitely grew up being more introverted, and I've had to kind of learned through practice how to be more of a socially connecting kind of person. And now I
Mhm.
have the members club. It's, really part of my job and it's something that I enjoy. But for somebody who feels like they would just freeze up in these types of environments and they don't naturally forge connections easily, what are some ways that they could start breaking out of their shell?
So, first, as crazy as it may feel, think less about yourself and think more about the other people. So, think more about putting other people at ease because we can only think about so many things at one time. So, the more you're focused on putting someone else at ease, the less mental bandwidth you'll have to focus on your own anxiety. Also, know that you're not alone in feeling uncomfortable in these types of situations. Fears of going to an event where you don't know anyone are right up there with heights in public speaking among adults.
Mm.
So, you're not alone if you don't feel super comfortable in these types of situations. It's also helpful to have some topics ready to talk about when you go to events. So one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they'll say like, I hate going to networking events, but I'm just going to do it and I'll be there from 6 to 8 and it'll be over soon and I'll just get it over with and it'll be done. But instead, you want to go in with some idea of what success would look like for you. And what success looks like for one person is not necessarily going to be the same as another person. Like maybe you want to practice talking about yourself. Maybe you want to practice sharing about some specific project that you're working on. Maybe you want to connect with a certain number of people or specific individuals, or maybe you just want to become more comfortable in conversation. Whatever your goal is, you want to set a realistic, actionable goal for what success would look like for this networking event so that you can actually achieve it. And then set yourself up for success by arriving within the first 10 minutes or so of an event, because when people are first arriving, they haven't really settled into their groups yet. And so they're more open to starting conversations, meeting new people. Once you get there a little bit later, towards the latter end of an event, people have settled into their groups of friends and they're sharing inside jokes and they're talking about things that are harder for an outsider to jump right in. It's not a malicious thing, it's just a natural thing. If you want to read more about this, Vanessa Van Edwards has a few books, but one of hers is Captivate, which explains this really well. It's also a good idea to get yourself a drink, get yourself something to eat. It doesn't matter whether you're drinking alcohol or not, but having a drink in your hand makes you come across as more accessible and more approachable. Another mistake that people often make at networking events is they will stand by the entrance, especially if they don't know anyone, and they're standing by the entrance or by registration, if it's like a conference or something like that, and they're waiting for someone they know to arrive so that they can just start talking to them as soon as they get there. But the
Hmm.
reality is that most of us, when we arrive at an event, we're not quite settled in yet. Like we're trying to figure out what this event is all about. We're checking in, maybe we're checking our coat. We also want to get a drink, something to eat. So a better place to stand is after the buffet, after the bar, where people are more relaxed. If there's an event that has a host, like let's say you're going to an event at a private home or at a club that's being hosted by a member, being somewhere where the host can see you is helpful, because a host has ideally been thoughtful in putting together the guest list. And the last thing any host wants to see is some of their guests not talking to anybody or uncomfortable. So they'll, if they see you not talking to anyone, they will welcome you into a conversation or they will facilitate an introduction. So that's another thing to keep in mind if you're ever going somewhere where you're not super comfortable or don't know a lot of people.
A quick thank you to today's sponsor, Ota. Ota is one of those brands that I've been a paying customer of long before they were interested in sponsoring the show, which is why I'm so happy to bring them to you today. If you're into menswear at all, shirts, ties, cufflinks, the things that really elevate an outfit, Ota has an incredible selection of both classic designs and more modern, expressive pieces. The company was founded by two brothers down under, and I can tell you, these guys truly care about their customers and creating the best products around. They also do fast worldwide shipping. Ota is offering a discount for listeners of the Gentleman's Collective podcast. Use the code JamesLawley10 at ota.com for a 10% discount. If you are upgrading your wardrobe this year, start with one of their shirts, neckties, or cufflinks. They make a bigger difference than most people realize. So that's JamesLawley10 at ota.com for 10% off. I've heard that big thing in DC culture is these types of networking events, and because so many people are involved in politics, they're going out, 3-4 times a week to these big rooms. Is that what
Yes,
you found?
definitely. Yes.
Yeah. What brought you to DC in the first place?
Law school. So before I went to law school, I was a TV news reporter and anchor, and I was covering general assignment news. So that means a little bit of everything. And I was most
Mhm.
attracted to legal stories and political stories. And so that's what motivated me to go to law school. And then I never left. And
That's so interesting.
I really like it. It's not for everyone, but I love it.
Mm. Yeah, I've also heard, I've actually not been yet, but I've also heard it's probably one of the more dressed up places in the United States.
It definitely is. And I've been traveling quite a bit for my book tour, and I would go to places like I write for EV Magazine, and I was in New York for Fashion Week, and I went to dinner with my husband at a steakhouse, and the way that people dress there, and I don't mean this as any sort of judgment, but it would not fly in Washington. Washington is a
Mm.
place where formal dress codes are definitely still alive and well, the gala scene is very much a black tie situation. And I know that's not the case in every city, but it definitely is here.
Yeah. Where are you now on your tour? What's the current stop?
So I am in Washington
Mhm.
today. I have an event at a Barnes and Noble in Virginia tonight, another event in DC tomorrow, and then I'm going to Richmond, Virginia, then Greenwich, Connecticut, then Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and then I end in New York, and then that's all that I know of. That'll be the end of the 2 weeks.
Okay. How was Nashville?
It was wonderful. It really was. And we had beautiful weather. I've been partnering with women's clothing store, Love Shack Fancy. And so
Mhm.
we've been doing book signings at a number of their stores. And each one is very similar, but also different. And this one was beautiful. And we had a nice day. And I'm so grateful. Really, really grateful.
Yeah, I've got to check that out. Love Shack Nancy.
Love Shack Fancy.
Fancy. Okay, got it, got it. Yeah, I
It's a
mean, you find this, you find regionally that I think being dressed up and putting in an effort with your appearance, it's not just a one size fits all, and it is cultural. You know, in some cities, it very much is the suit and the tie for the men or the dress and the heels for the ladies. But yeah, I'm in Austin, Texas now, so when I go out, I'll see a huge variety of outfits and levels of effort. But somebody could be wearing boots, jeans, and a pressed shirt and a hat. And I would say actually that they've made quite a lot of effort. Even though that's a more casual outfit, it's not something that you could just roll out of bed wearing. And somebody has taken pride in their clothes there.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
Yeah. So at the moment, I would imagine that a lot of the people that are reading the book and a lot of the people that follow your content are skewing a little bit more towards women. Am I right there?
Definitely. I would say book readers and social media followers, women. I would say when I
Mhm.
do speaking engagements for corporate clients, it's more 50-50.
Mhm.
But the social media world and readers are more women for sure.
It's interesting. I feel like just social media worlds in general are always rather gendered, even if we don't try and make it that way. I mean, obviously, my brand is has the word gentleman in it, so it was always going to attract a male audience. But for me, I do find that most of the things I talk about could be fairly applicable to both men and women. It might take a little bit of imagination to reinterpret some things differently. For you,
Sure.
what would you say are some things that men need to understand about etiquette or some of the roles that men play in society that are a little bit different to what you would necessarily educate a woman on?
I love this question and it's so nuanced. I will say my first thought when you're saying how social media can become so gendered, I write for EV Magazine where there are a lot of readers that are
Mm-hmm.
single and would love to get married. And they write in, I have a column called Ask Allison, and they write in all kinds of etiquette questions. And I get a lot of questions around like, how do I find a husband that is more chivalrous or understands
Mm.
etiquette or like is a gentleman essentially? And so there are a lot of questions around like how soon is too soon to talk about the things that really matter to them, whether it's like faith or family or lifestyle or politics or any of those things that might
Mm-hmm.
be controversial. So those are things that are talked about, or things like I'm getting married and we're sitting at a sweetheart table and I want my husband to know how to eat a meal in a way that is respectable, but I also don't want to offend him. And so those kinds of things come up. And I will say, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, I receive more of these questions from women, but it doesn't mean that men aren't thinking the same thing. If you're in a relationship, you want to be really kind in the way that you're sharing something. If you're ever trying to share, like, please eat with your mouth closed. Or if there's some things, like, let's say you have your, fiance, husband, boyfriend is in a role where he's entertaining clients or he's interviewing for a job and there will be a meal component to it. If you have a vested interest in their success, make sure that you're sharing any sort of etiquette that you want to share in a way that's super considerate, that's so clear that you're on their team, that you want to help them, that it's private, that you're not telling anybody else, and that you're only telling them because you love them and you believe in them and you don't want the fact that they don't know what to do with their napkin or they don't know, to try their meal before they apply salt and pepper to it or something like that. It's important
Mm.
that you're sharing that in a really gracious way so that they don't feel offended. Because like the worst etiquette of all is using your knowledge of etiquette just for the purpose of making someone else feel less than or bad.
That's a great point. I think it's like delivering any kind of feedback or criticism.
Mm-hmm.
The same rules apply. It's really interesting that you write for Evie. I'm familiar with this magazine and it keeps coming up, but I'm not quite sure what the origin story of it is. It's also interesting that I forget the lady's name who started it, but she started a magazine, which
Yeah.
is today kind of an unusual approach to take.
Well, I see things, and Brittany Hugaboom is amazing, and so she started this magazine with her husband.
Hmm.
But I see other magazines also that are making a comeback, or there's just this resurgence of people wanting the glossy pages that they can hold in their hand
Mm.
and put on their coffee table, and I think it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the questions that you get from young women, because we've got men listening completely on the other side that might be saying, I'm
Yes.
here, I know how
Yes.
to dress, I know how to, or, or at least they're trying to. I think that's important to remember, though, is like we're all just making an effort to be better. Nobody's perfect. It's not a journey
Mhm.
that you ever complete, right? And the last
Mhm.
thing we want to do as well is to intimidate people or make them feel like they're going to be judged by somebody else just
Yes.
because they dress nicely or they have table manners.
Yes.
So what kind of dating struggles do you encounter a lot from these young women, whether they're on your Instagram or they're sending in a question to your Evie column?
Women want to be approached. They want men to ask them out on dates. They want them to take initiative and they want them to come up with date ideas, and
Mm.
they really value chivalry. That's what I'm seeing.
Okay, that's great to hear. It's great to hear. I think a lot of people on the men's side, maybe they feel like they don't want women to approach them, or they just feel, I think they just feel very intimidated by the whole idea and very scared.
Yes.
I always say to women that bring this up, I say, like, just smile at them. If you
Yes.
just
Yes.
smile, I'm sure that the guy would gladly go over there. And I think that's how, when it does happen naturally for people, it tends to be that kind of, you accidentally make eyes or something and there's a smile,
Yes.
and there's a connection there. It can be really hard to go up to somebody that hasn't even, looked at you.
Yes.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When it comes to talking about important topics, like you mentioned, when should I bring up faith, the family? I'm of the opinion that you should bring that up very, very early,
I
like first date early,
yes.
because if you don't agree on that, then what's the point? I also would be wary of somebody that like isn't prepared to put that out there and
Yes.
say that that's what they want and that's who they are early on.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So
But I also, sorry, go ahead. I want to
no,
hear your
well,
thoughts on that.
I entirely agree on that. Recommendations I give is that you don't want your first date to sound like an interrogation or to feel like an interrogation, but you can still get the answers that you're looking for. And you want to keep two things in mind. So, one, ask softer, open ended questions like about family and about weekend plans and things like that, that will, like if you ask someone what they're doing this weekend, you're probably going to learn a thing or two about their values without asking them,
Mm.
like, do you go to church on Sundays or whatever is most important to you. So ask open-ended questions and also be prepared to answer the same questions that you're asking. So this is a two-way street, and it's not just you gathering information about this person you're dating, it's also you sharing information about yourself with that person. But I completely agree with you that your time is important and there's no reason to beat around the bush or to delay talking about things that are important to you.
Yeah, and I think it is also probably the responsibility of the man to actually bring some of these topics up on a date, because they are scary. They are things that a lot of people might, I don't really want to bring that up, right away. But I think it's okay to, as you say, have those more open questions where they don't feel like there's a correct answer. If
Mm,
somebody asks you, so do you go to church on Sundays? You can
hmm.
immediately tell that if the answer is no, you've given the wrong answer, which
Exactly.
also that can also lead people to give misleading information. People are nervous. People want you to like them. They're going to say what you think they want you to say.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, more open-ended, I think, is much better. If you're enjoying this podcast, you will love the Gentleman's Digest. This is our weekly newsletter sent straight to your inbox, packed with insights and recommendations. You'll find the link to become a reader in the description. I'm personally at a stage now where a lot of things in my life are starting to settle and get more stable. So I feel like I'm actually much more open to being in a relationship now, and it would actually be quite a good time. So I'm starting to put myself out there in that kind of sense, which does include dating apps. What are your thoughts on that whole situation? Obviously, you're married now, but you hear from single women all the time. What are their experiences on dating apps, especially if they are trying to find somebody a little bit more serious and traditional?
I've seen everything from people who hate them, never want to use them, to people who have found their husbands and are living happily ever after with their husbands who they met on dating apps. So it really runs the gamut. But my recommendation would be to be yourself, be honest, be kind, and treat whoever you're meeting with the respect that they deserve, because everyone is on there because they're looking to find their person, and whether or not that is you, you want to be really respectful and really kind in the process. So like no ghosting, being clear. I think oftentimes, and this isn't just in the dating context, but in life in general, people can think that ambiguity or like never saying no is actually more kind, but in reality, it's much more kind to be clear, and you can be
Mm-hmm.
clear and kind at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's also really good, especially because these apps can be very addictive, and they're designed to be addictive. They're designed to put you in like a negative mental state. So you
Mm.
keep using them. You think that the solution is just more swipes. The solution is more matches. I think it's really important for both men and women to set some healthy boundaries of, I'm not going to go on this for more than 15 minutes today. I'm not going to reply to this message until tomorrow. I think if somebody's interested in you, then they will respect your communication style. If anything, it will probably work to your advantage, actually, to not be, not don't have the notifications pinging on the phone. Don't be replying to the messages and the matches as soon as they come through. Take your time and just try and integrate it as a small part of your life, not the whole strategy.
That's a great point.
What are some good places where people are able to meet more organically these days?
Places where you would be anyways, where you have a shared interest, or like whether it's through your faith, through hobbies, through sports, through performing arts, through philanthropy, school, all of these things are great places. And also, don't be afraid to let other people in your life know that you're looking to find someone if you're open to being set up, because while dating apps can be really successful, meeting someone in the wild or having a friend or family member set you up can also be great too. So it can be a both and approach. It doesn't need to be either or.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's important that whichever one, if you're doing the dating apps, always have some more IRL options
Mm-hmm.
going. It's funny that like meeting people organically has become so unusual. We say in the wild, or I met them IRL. Some of my favorite dates I've ever been on, I would meet like literally, at a not a bus stop, but just like almost in the street, completely
Yes.
organically. And it's always more fun. What I will say in defense of dating apps, and I think this is why I'm still, on them and still advocate for them, is if you are a certain type of person, which if you watch this podcast or you read Evie magazine, you probably
Yes.
have certain values that you want in your partner. It can
Right.
be really hard to just spring upon those, like at a bar
Yes.
or at a coffee shop. Whereas
Yes.
on a dating app, I do think you get to know pretty quickly if that's going to
Mm-hmm.
be somebody that's on the same wavelength.
That's fair. That's very
Yeah.
fair.
What about first dates? It's always a debate of coffee, dinner, activities. What are your thoughts on that?
I like more brief first dates. I think that
Mm-hmm.
it depends on the type of dinner. Like, is it a really long dinner? But I think coffee's a good first date, low stakes, get to know each other. And then if you hit it off, then you can do the activity or the thing that's a little more involved.
I think dinner is great second or third. I used to
Hmm.
do dinner all the time. And at the time, I also thought this is clearly a great idea because everybody I ask says yes and they always want to go out again. And then I was like, well, maybe they just really wanted to go to that restaurant, let's be honest. I don't
Oh,
know, but I'm sure there's a small
yes,
percentage, you know.
yes,
And I also found that I actually didn't enjoy the dinner because I would be so focused on the conversation. You know, I
yes,
would think, well, I was looking forward to going to this restaurant, but I really didn't eat very much food and I wasn't really focused. You know, I just wanted to get to know
yes,
them. We probably should have done something differently. What I think gets a little bit harder is when people start to slowly move away from the dating phase toward the relationship phase. You know, they've done the
yes,
activity, the dinner, the coffee, they got to know each other, but now they're trying to figure out, well, where does this go? You know, what is the direction here? Um,
yes.
what do you see as being successful as you start to move toward more of a serious relationship? I know that's a bit of an open-ended question, but I think
No,
it's
not at
something that
all.
people struggle to navigate.
You're so right. This is something that many people struggle with. And what I always recommend is be honest and upfront and don't feel like you need to play games. Like, if this person doesn't like that you're being too forward, then maybe they're not the right person for you. If you are dating with a serious interest in a serious relationship, then you should make that known from the beginning. From the beginning. So that doesn't mean that you're naming your children on the first date, but it does mean that they know that you're not just looking for someone to try out fun restaurants. You're looking for someone to get to know and to develop a really serious relationship with. And so let them know. And it doesn't matter whether it's the man or the woman who has that or initiates the conversation about, are we ready for the next step? But the sooner the better, in my view.
I'm working on a video at the moment, actually, titled "How to Lead a Relationship Like a Gentleman," and people are
Wow.
gonna be a little bit, oh, I don't know about that word lead. The way that I think about it is, if there's two people sat in the car, two
Mm-hmm.
people trying to hold the steering wheel will cause a car crash. One
Mm.
person needs to hold the steering wheel. The other person in the passenger seat has a say on where you're going. They will be helping in some way, but ultimately one person, I think, should be overall steering the ship, and it's a team effort. But how do you see the dynamics in a male and female relationship that is going somewhere? It's going towards marriage. It's going towards family building. What do you see the man's role there in setting the direction?
So I respect that this doesn't work for everyone, but I can speak from my own experience, having been married almost 13 years, that it works best when my husband is leading, for sure. He is the head of the household, and it might look different in different relationships, but it's the most natural and the most loving way for us to go about our marriage and our family. And I find that on balance, many women appreciate that. And it's not about being subservient, it's not about being inferior, it's not about being less than. But I find a real beauty in the man taking on that primary leadership role.
So, what does that look like in more tangible terms for you?
I would say being the ultimate protector, being the person that I can always count on. Um, yeah, the person that I can lean on for anything, my ultimate cheerleader, and someone that makes me feel really, really safe. Like, not just in a practical way, but also just like a soft place to land. Like, no emotion or hardship or like anything I can say. Like I can say whatever, or I can experience anything, and I can share it with my husband, um, and he'll receive it well. And I won't say that we're
Mm.
perfect; we are far from it, but that's what we aspire to. And then for us, faith is super important. So it all comes back to faith. Like for us, it's
Mhm.
God first, spouse second, and then family third.
If you're enjoying this podcast, you might like to know that we also have a private members club for like minded modern gentlemen all over the world. You'll find the link to apply in the description. I think you're a really interesting example here as well, because I think some women are afraid to let the man lead, or afraid to be in a more traditional relationship because they don't want their life to come second. Whereas you're, a renowned author, you have a very big presence, you're very successful in your career, you may be more well known than your husband. I don't know who your husband is, but it's not like you're just at home making bread, which is also fine if you wanted to. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that probably it goes to show that just because your husband is the leader, it doesn't mean that you aren't also driving the car of your own life, and you're also
Mm-hmm.
doing things that are having an incredible impact on people outside of your family, total strangers even.
Yeah. And I also think like I consider myself pretty classically feminine, super
Hmm.
feminine. My husband's really masculine. And so I lead in my own way. But for my husband and I, we're both really ambitious. We work best when we're not competitive with each other. Like we play to
Mm.
each other's strengths and we try not to compete with each other. I will say Washington is a unique place in that there are a lot of women. Like I'm an attorney. I went to law school and worked with a lot of female lawyers, and I worked in the West Wing of the White House. So I've worked with a lot of very accomplished men and women. And even in the marriages where the woman is very successful outside of the home, I find that it's really important that the man feels like the leader. And I don't want to
Hmm.
speak in super general terms because I know every relationship is not the same. And you won't find me like, I don't want to make broad generalizations that everybody should adopt, but that's a theme that I've seen again and again.
Yeah, and I think that for the men listening, I think most men instinctively want that kind of dynamic in their relationship. Um, Sometimes the negative is that there can be a sense of entitlement from
Mm,
a man, but I think to be able to be a leader in a relationship, or to have a woman that wants to go on that journey with you, you also have to have a journey that's worth embarking on. And people
mm,
really oversimplify that to think it
yeah.
just means making a lot of money or looking a certain way, but it's not. I would say it's more actually about having a vision and having a direction that somebody can join you in, rather than I'm the man, you're the woman, therefore this is how it's going to be.
Yes, I've read a lot on this, and I love the book. I think it's called Love and Respect in Marriage. But also Arthur Brooks. He's a professor at Harvard University, was formerly at the American Enterprise Institute, and he talks about how men want to be admired and women want to be adored. And I
Mm.
think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I had a conversation recently with a woman who was a bit older, I think like 34, 35, and struggling in some sense to find a suitable partner. And she said, I have to admire him in some sense. It doesn't have to
Yes.
be in every sense, but there has to
Yes.
be something about him that I find, truly inspiring, or like, how does he do that?
Yes.
I wish I could do that, but I can't. It could be physical, it could be intellectual, it could even be a creative thing. What are those things for you with your husband, if you don't mind me asking, that you truly, admire and respect?
One would be his work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
He is indefatigable. And we've been together a really long time. So we were both figure skaters. We met as teenagers. I represented the
Oh,
US, he
wow.
represented Canada, and we trained with Russian coaches in Pennsylvania. And that was how we met. And we got engaged right before my 22nd birthday and got married really young by Northeast standards. And we've done everything together. Like from when we first started dating, I hadn't even had an internship yet. And since then, I've worked, in TV. I've gone to law school. I've practiced law. I've worked all over the government, started my own business. And meanwhile, he's grown this massive real estate enterprise with a huge team and has gotten into development and all kinds of things that I'm super proud of. And so it's been interesting for us because I have so many friends that are similar to the woman who you were just talking about, who is
Mm-hmm.
35 and hasn't found her partner yet. And I see now I have so many friends in Washington that have kind of accomplished a lot and they're trying to find their person. And Jason and I really grew up together. And so we've seen so many of the iterations.
Yeah.
Like started out, he was a store manager at Walmart, and I was a TV news reporter, waking up at 2:30 in the morning. Um, but things that I admire about him are how hard he works, and also the way he leads. Not just me, but he has a really special way of inspiring other people and bringing out the best in them.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you shared that. When you said you've been married 13 years, I thought you must have got married very young. But I think I'm interested to get your take on this. But I think a lot of people in their kind of late 20s and 30s that are still single, I include myself in this category, I guess. I'm about to turn 28 and I'm still single. I think we do suffer a bit from a decision paralysis and
Mm,
this feeling of there's always some better option. And especially because our own lives are getting better, and we are getting better as people. We think that we're going to just keep attracting better and better people. But then you start to ask yourself, well, what do I mean by better? you know
mm.
and when I look at people that seem to have the happiest, healthiest, richest lives in many different senses, it's people that have these really strong relationships. Do you think that that is something that is somewhat symptomatic of our time of social media, dating apps, and for better or for worse, putting careers ahead, that people are just struggling to actually pick one and make it work?
Yes, and I think there's also this unique element of how we have visibility into other people's lives or what we perceive to be other people's lives. And so it can cause a distraction or it can cause confusion. And we live in a world where it's so easy to have something delivered on Amazon the same day or to order exactly what we want on Uber Eats or like just have so many things tailor made just for us. And
Mm-hmm.
there might be an expectation that you can find the perfect person that fits all of this criteria that may or may not be the right fit for you or even realistic. But I will say, and this is not me saying that you should settle for less or that you should lower your standards, but something that I have found really beautiful is having my husband being a witness in my life through all of these seasons. So, like, when we were 19 or 20, and he remembers me when I was a figure skater, and my biggest problem was whether I could land my twizzles or like just things like that. And then like getting into law school or buying houses, renovating houses, um, the ups and the downs, like just having someone that's been through it all with you is a really special thing.
Mm. What are some of the things that have stayed the same since you were in your late teens? What are those principles that really haven't changed?
I would say with both of us, we're really hardworking and we share, like, we are not people that, like, at the end of the workday, we don't talk about work. We'll be in Bora Bora for New Year's Eve talking about work on New Year's Eve
Mm.
because it's very integrated for us. We care a lot about what we do. We're big, like, dreamers and planners, and we're always dreaming and planning together. And that hasn't changed, whether we were talking about figure skating or talking about things now as we're more like full on adults. And I would also say community. We are very intentional about the people that are in our life. So like we have this tradition every New Year's we go away and we reflect on how the year has gone and what our goals are going forward and what we want to prioritize. And we're very, very intentional about the family and friends that we want in our lives and making sure that
Mm.
we make time for them.
I think that intentionality just of how you approach life is something that it really helps if you're on the same page about, because I'm very much like that. Like, I'll sit down and write out the goals for the year and what I want to achieve, and I'll break my life into quarters and track everything.
Right.
If I'm with somebody that thinks I'm crazy for doing that, we're gonna struggle to like get on the same track,
Mhm.
because you need to both be on the same page. And if I think I always wanted to avoid kind of floating through life.
Mhm.
And especially in a relationship, I think there are a lot of things that you can do that keep the relationship healthy, that do require that level of intentionality. Like, so many people, they get married and they stop dating each other, they stop going out
Yes.
regularly, they stop making time for each other. It's like, no, it's I think love is more of an action rather than just a word that you say.
Yes. That's so well said.
Yeah. So, what's next for you once this book tour wraps up? Are you working on the sequel already, or are you taking some time out, or doing something else for a little while?
Well, there will be a book two, but it won't be
Mm-hmm.
published immediately just because of the nature of how long it takes to publish a book when you're working with a traditional publishing house. But I'm trying to soak it all in now. I'm currently on week two, or I guess tomorrow will be the start of
Mm-hmm.
week two, since the book was published, and super grateful. Just super, super grateful.
Absolutely. Well, I'm grateful to you for putting more of this information out there and inspiring both men and women also to reconsider maybe what etiquette actually means and how they can use it in their lives. So, for the gentlemen watching, what's the best way that they can get their hands on this book?
So the book is called Was It Something I Said? Everyday Etiquette to Avoid Awkward Moments in Relationships, Work, and Life. And it is available wherever books are sold and even outside of the US too. So, really, anywhere you buy a book, you can find it.
Perfect, perfect. Well, Alison, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule. I'm excited to get my hands on the book and finish it off, actually holding the thing.
Oh.
Um, so, yeah, thank you so much again. I really appreciate it.